All right. We'll give everyone about 2 minutes. We're just going to get started here. Welcome, everyone. My name is Kevin, and I'd like to welcome you all to the Zero to Auth in an Hour or Less workshop. We have a lot of things planned for our agenda today, but if you're not familiar, we're going to be introducing Descope. Descope is an authentication service that allows you to completely customize how your authentication works from start to finish using drag and drop workflows. So let's go ahead and get started. Just a little thing about me. My name is Kevin. I work at Descope. I live in San Francisco, and things I like to do in my free time are drive and work on cars, traveling, and also helping kids and teaching them that. So for our agenda today, we have 3 big things. First, we're going to kind of quickly gloss over some authentication concepts that are useful, especially if you're not totally familiar, that I'm going to be referencing later on, and make sure. And once everyone's up to speed with how kind of at a high level authentication works, I'm going to show you guys how to set up your Descope account, show you guys how to create your first flow, and then finally we're actually going to code this out and put it in a React and Node application. So you can see how easy it is to implement this drag and drop authentication in your applications. Some prerequisites for you to follow. It's good to probably have a basic understanding of React, Node.js, and Express. Also, if you want to follow along with the repo that I'm going to use, we'll provide the link for it, but you'll need a GitHub account, obviously, to do that. And an IDE of your choice. I'm going to be using VS Code. Finally, you'll need Node version 18 in order to run the sample app that we've provided for this workshop. Let's get into it. So the first question that I want to present is what authentication is. I hear authentication and authorization, those 2 words, kind of used interchangeably. And it's important to understand what authentication means. Authentication is, simply put, just verifying that a person is who they say they are. So the actual definition you see here is verifying the identity of the user or device attempting to access a particular application or system. But essentially, if you could think about like at an airport, the first thing you have to do before you go to your gate is actually go through security, and that's where you would put your, show your passport or driver's license to a security officer. That's an example of authentication. Basically, you verifying that I am Kevin Gao, or you are who you are. Then authorization, which is sometimes confused with authentication, is the concept of access rights. So the concept of making sure that after the person is who they say they're, making sure that after the person has confirmed they are who they say they are, actually making sure that they have the correct access to the resource or to do what they're trying to do. And so to go back to the airport analogy, that would be like you showing up at the gate and actually showing your boarding pass to make sure you have the right to be on that particular plane. And so authorization and authentication, you can see they kind of go hand in hand. But as we'll show in a high level, Descope actually handles both. The diagram will showcase how it all works in tandem with the user that I'm going to show next. Also, if you're interested in authentication concepts that aren't touched in this workshop, you can visit our learning center at descope.com/learn. And yeah, so some apps authentication steps. So the first, this is just kind of a high level of how authentication works. Basically, there's a browser or a client and a server, and how kind of a high level of how authentication can be implemented is a user provides a certain credential, maybe like a username and password. The server will then validate those credentials, make sure that the user is who they say they are from the credential they provided, and then return some form of access token, usually as a cookie. It can also be stored in the browser local storage, but it's stored somewhere on the browser to then be used for all subsequent requests. So if you think about like you visiting Gmail and actually looking at your email, the first time you log in, you provide credentials to prove you are who you say you are, and then that token allows all subsequent requests to validate you are who you say you are without having to ask for those credentials again and again. And so this is kind of like what the concept of authentication is built on, and this whole process is known as a session. And this aspect is what Descope can help you implement fairly easily. So to kind of dive a little bit deeper into how this works and what the components are of each of these processes. So there's the user, which is me or whoever is using the application, the desktop or mobile device, which would store the session token that you saw in the previous diagram. Then the app server, which would be your particular server. That's where the request would be going. So if I sent a request to Gmail, that would be an example of that. And then the authentication service is what actually will create that token, will send it back to the desktop or mobile, et cetera. That is what Descope helps you integrate and build fairly easily. So without further ado, let's get into it. So we're actually going to do, as I showed in the agenda, we're actually going to set up a Descope account. And you're going to use this link right here to sign up, and I'll walk through and show you guys how to do that. And then we're actually going to code it all out in our React Node application. So let's get to it. All right. So first things first, when you go to the sign up page, you're going to be taken to this website here. I have it in incognito because I've actually already signed up. And I'm just going to sign up with a version of my email. Very straightforward. You can see how easy it is to sign up. And then I'm just going to get this code right here, paste it in here, and then I'll type in my name. You can see how easy it is to sign up and create my account. So now that's all that's needed to get access to our Descope console, which is where we're going to construct and build how the authentication works. And so once you're in here, all you need to do is, you can see it says in just a few easy steps, you can build passwordless user journeys in less than 10 minutes. All you need to do is click on get started. And then you can walk through this wizard, and it will actually generate the flow that I was talking about, which shows, and I'll actually show you what that looks like, but basically shows you how your authentication is working from start to finish. And here it will ask you some basic questions like who uses your applications. Let's just select consumers for now, but this would be like if you're running a B2B business or a B2C business. Click next. And then it's going to ask you, you can see it says B2C here, and it's going to ask you which authentication methods do you want to use. In this case, I actually prepared a flow that we're going to use, so it doesn't really matter what we select here, but I'm just going to select social login and magic link. And then you can see here, it's going to ask you which method you want to use for MFA. MFA is multi-factor authentication, so if you want to provide a second kind of layer of authentication if there's a potential security vulnerability, or like if if you want to kind of do an extra step to verify a specific person, you can. In this case, not really needed, so we'll just say go ahead without MFA. And then we're ready to see Descope in action. So this is what's important. These sign in, sign up, or in, and step up, these are flows that are actually going to be generated for us when we click on next. It's going to be generated based on the selection that we previously made. So we want, as a primary mode of authentication, magic link and social login. We don't want any MFA. And when I click next, something similar to what we were expecting will show up in this screen right here. And so there's a lot to unpack. So let me just explain what all of this means. But basically, this is the login screen. As you can see, we have email and social login, just like we selected in the getting started with wizard. And if you actually try and log in with email, so if I try to log in with Kevin@descope.com, you see it's going to send a magic link that then we could then, we could then click on from our email, and it would validate that we are who we say we are. Or we could use Continue with Google, Continue with Microsoft. So I'm in incognito. I'm not going to actually log in for you right here. I'll show you that in another minute. Basically, the other components that you need to be aware of are these two. So when we're actually coding it out, you can see how easy it is to integrate this login page with your application. So all you'll need to do is take this bit of code in your front end in React, or if you need to use the web component, you can, and paste it into your project. This right here, this component will actually display the login screen, and this needs to be wrapped with full app, which we'll go over when we actually implement it. And then for the back end, this little bit of code will just validate the session token that's created. And so let me actually show you guys how this all works, and show you guys what the login process looks like. So let's go to another page that I've already set up. This is my my own personal kind of play around Descope account. And you can see here the only difference is the project ID is different. And this project ID, it's not a secret. That's why it can be embedded in the front end. It's just a way of associating your particular flows that you created with your application. And so right here, if we go into flows, sign up or in, you can see that how our authentication is supposed to work is we display a welcome screen, we show email, OAuth, all of that stuff. And then depending on which one we select, if we go with email, we can sign up or in a user using email and OTP. OTP being one-time password. So when we actually have, sign someone up, you can see the verification screen right here where the user will actually type in their OTP. And then after they've been authenticated, N will just basically return the session token that we need to validate and authenticate any future requests. Same thing with OAuth. OAuth is obviously a lot simpler because Descope isn't handling the login process. It's actually Google or Microsoft or Facebook or whatever you want that's doing that. But you can see what's really neat about flows is, let's say I want to add Apple login, for example. All I need to do is drag that in there, and then it's in my UI. But most importantly, it's also working as an authentication method. And they all use OAuth, so it's fine. If I wanted to add something like biometrics, I could totally do that. And then all you need to do is just add an action, sign up or in with passkeys, and just connect the dots. And you're in. So this is something really unique about flows, and something that makes changing your authentication over the lifespan of your entire application something that's really easy to do. Other neat things you can do with flows is use conditional statements to actually perform various logic. So what I mean by that is, let's say you wanted to display a different login screen depending on if you're from the US or from another country. All you would need to do is use this conditional statement here. I'll show that again here, and then drag that into your application. And then under key, say something like geolocation contains, something like United States. And then if I'm not from the US, do this. If I am from the US, do something else. So if I were to test this out in my getting started wizard, you can see nothing would show up because I'm not from, because I'm obviously from the US. And this makes implementing a lot of logic in your authentication very straightforward. So this is just, the idea of a flow. I'll also go over some other stuff if we have time at the end, but this is just kind of basics of what you need to know for what a flow is and how it works. So let's actually start embedding this in our application. So what we can do is, let's go to VS Code. And hopefully you guys have already cloned this repository. The link should have been sent in the chat. But basically, this right here This code and this code, as I said earlier, is what we'll need to actually log in. This project ID you can also use. This is the one that I've created for this particular workshop. You can also use the one that you created on your own in your own Getting Started wizard. But basically, what you want to do is when you open up the repo, the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to run npm install. This will install all of the packages that you'll need, including the React and Node SDK for the client and the server. The next thing you're going to want to do once that's completed is run npm link TypeScript. Since we're using Node 18, we'll need to do this. So we can run this right here. And then finally, I've actually prepared two scripts, one for running the client and one for running the server very easily with npm. So all you need to do if you want to run the server is just type npm run server. You can see the server is running on port 8080. And for the client, open up a new terminal window here, and then you can type in npm run. So you can see here, this is what our application looks like. So we have this is a generic kind of revenue operations type application. You can see here, you have a bunch of deal information and stuff like that. Where this is actually coming from, it's coming from our Node backend. So if you want to look at network, and if I can show you, if I click on one of these, I can show you that these are API calls that are actually returning all of this information. And so what we want to do is we want to build out the middleware so that the backend only returns this information if the session is valid. And we also want to make changes to the front end. We want to add the sign-in page. We want to add maybe some logic to change this login to log out if you're logged in and recognize that. We want to also make sure that all of these requests actually include the session token in the authorization header. So all of those things we're going to do, and I'll show you guys how easy it is to do that. So right now, assuming that you clone the unfinished repo, this is what your repo should look like. First thing you want to do is you want to wrap the entire application in Auth provider. That will allow the front end to be able to use all of our Descope React hooks and everything like that, and also display the Descope login component. And so what we need to do is we need to, under client, go to source, and then go to our app.jsx that I have open already. So this is our general entire application. What we can do is we can just copy over the Auth provider wrapper from the front-end code snippet in the Getting Started wizard. So in return, we can do this. And then because I have some auto formatting in my VS Code, it will just automatically format this. And then you can see it says Auth provider not defined. That's because we haven't actually imported Auth provider from the React SDK. So let's do that now. Auth provider. React SDK. Cool. So now we're good to go as far as the front end is concerned. We have everything. That's all we need to do to associate our application with the project that we've created and all the flows that we've created. And so now let's get into the actual logic of all the things we wanted to do in the front end. So the very first thing is I wanted to have a sign-in screen, right? Because right now, if I try and use this application, if I click on login, it redirects me to sign in, but there is a sign-in page because I need to actually embed the Descope component. And what's really great is that all of this UI can be all configured without any code, and you can do the styling and everything all in the console. And all you need to do is just paste this component into your application. So what you need to do is you need to, under source, go to auth, sign-in.jsx, and then you can see this will come up right here. You can see I actually already defined an onSuccess function. It's a callback function that will just, on successful authentication will navigate back to the home page. And then here I have this div, which is already styled. What I would like to do is just drop Descope in there. And then the reason it's not formatting is because I also need to import Descope into the application here. And then what I can do is I can just, instead of doing it like this, I can just drop it in, copy it again. Oh, sorry, right there. All right. So now you can see I just dropped the Descope component in there, and boom, we have our login page. So if you can see here, now our login page that we already built appears. And any changes that we make, you know, if I want to, let's say, remove Apple now, and reload the page, now Apple goes away. So it's very extensible. It's basically future-proof. You can have everything, all your login components and everything all styled and stored in the console, and it will automatically update throughout your application. And then you can see we have, you know, we don't have too much other than that. We just have the login page. And this is all you need to actually generate the JSON web token or the session token. So if I actually sign in like this, you can see it looks like nothing happened, but if we go to application, there's a DS and DSR token. These are the session and refresh tokens. These are the tokens that are used to establish the session between the client and the server. And so that basically says that we're logged in. Now we just need to actually make sure that this onSuccess function is being utilized to then navigate back to the home page. So onSuccess here, currently, it's just displaying in the console the username and email. Instead of doing that, let's just call our onSuccess function, and we should be good. So now, next time I sign in, and I'll use it a lot just because it's easier, I can just log in with Google. Boom, we're done. And now we are logged in. However, we have no logic to actually check to see if the user is logged in, to change this, do anything, and we'll get to that. But you can see that's, you know, in literally just, you know, maybe 5 or 10 minutes max, we've wrapped our application in the auth provider with their project ID and just dropped in a sign-in page that has fully functioning authentication. So now let's clean up the application a little bit more. So we're good for sign-in, I think, for now. If we go to navbar, this is referring to this right here, this navigation bar. We want to make sure that this actually allows you to log in and log out and changes depending on whether or not the user is logged in or not. And so right now you can see if you go to navbar, which is under components, header, navbar, you can see there's 2 callback functions, log out and log in. Those 2 functions will both actually navigate you back to the sign-in page. The difference is logout should actually log the user out with Descope. And so how we can do that is we can use the React SDK like we did for the sign-in page, super simple. All we need to do is import use Descope, and then create a logout function using use Descope, and utilize it in a try catch before we navigate to sign out. So we'll do that. And then once this logout user callback function is called, it will actually use the use Descope to basically invalidate the session, remove that token from the browser, do all the necessary logic that it needs to make sure that the user is successfully logged out, and will still navigate back to sign in. So right now this is not being utilized because we have no way of calling this in the UI, but we're going to change that in a second. So The second thing we want to do right now is we want to change this login button so that when we're logged in, it actually changes to log out, and it will log us out with this logout user callback function. And so how we do that is we, under here in this return logic, we are returning a popover, specifically a login popover, which is what this is. And you can see the login popover just displays login in a p tag with the color green. But we also have this logout popover, which does the same thing, but it displays logout in red, and also, most importantly, uses the logout user function, not the login user function. So we need to be able to basically display this logout popover, but let's do it dynamically using the Descope SDK so that it's very easy, so that it will automatically recognize when a user is logged in and change depending on whether they're logged in or not. And so the way we do that is we got to import one more thing called use session. This is actually going to give us session information. So current session information, if the user is logged in or not, would be an example of that. And then we're going to initialize a function called Is Authenticated and using use session. So this is what we'll actually use to verify whether or not the session token is valid, basically, in the front end. And then here, instead of just displaying the login popover, what we want to do is copy this and say, if the user is not authenticated, then display it. So right now, if we go back to our application, we were actually logged in. And so now you don't see anything here because it's recognizing that the user is authenticated and not displaying. And all we got to do now is just display the same thing, but instead of displaying if the user is authenticated, the login popover, we want to display the logout popover. So now you can see it's back, but most importantly, it says logout here. And when I click on logout, it's going to call the logout function here and actually invalidate the session. So now, because I've logged out successfully and used the SDK, if I go back to localhost 3000, you can see it says login because we're not logged in. So, pretty much you can see with using a lot of the available, and this is all documented in the React SDK GitHub README, it's all documented on our website. But a lot of very useful features, pre-built functions already built into the SDK that are there for you to use for situations just like this. And then let's log in for a second. So as you can see, if we log in, I can access everything, and you see it says log out. Great. The issue though is still showing the data, even if I'm logged out. So this is the kind of the meat of the workshop, is actually showing you guys how to change the request to send the session token in the authorization HTTP header, and also showing you how to modify your backend so that using the Node SDK, you can validate the session token. And so the final step for the front end is just like I was saying earlier, is just to actually make sure that every request that you send, all of these API requests here, I could show you those in the network real quick, all the API requests you make here to actually get this information, that these show you that these include the bearer token that you want. And so currently, if we go to dashboard, which is under dashboard, dashboard.jsx, you can see here there's a couple little bits of code. We have this redirect to login function, which just navigates to the sign-in page. We have a notification that will automatically show up if the API request fails, it will automatically redirect to login. So that logic is already built into this application. The only thing you have to worry about is right here. So these are all of the API. This is the access request that all of the that all of the requests are going to use to actually get this information. So these are all GET requests from the localhost 8080 server. And then you see here in headers, we have authorization bearer, and you saw that here in all of our requests. So what we need to do is we need to actually include the session token. And the session token is stored in the browser's local storage. The refresh token can either be stored in the cookie or local storage, but all we care about is the session token right now. And so let's just add the session token. Problem is, we don't know where this is coming from. So normally you'd actually have to get this from local storage or whatever, or another easy way to do it, just use a built-in React SDK function like we've been doing before. Easy way to do that, all you got to do is you just got to import use session, import get session token. It's a predefined function that you can then set session token equal to. So const session token equals get session token. So now, if the user is logged in, every GET request that you make will include the session token as a bearer token in the HTTP header. So let's actually test this out. So we're currently not logged in, so it's not going to work. It's just going to display nothing. But let's log in. Now, every request I make, you can see, instead of just saying bearer, it says bearer, and then this is the actual session token you'll need for the server to validate that the person is there. So we're good to go on the front end. This is everything that we need. We've done a lot of little things, but now it's just a question of validating it on the back end and making sure that the data is not returned to the user who's not authenticated. So all you need to do is let's quit out of the client for now. We can keep it running, and we'll go to the server here and then open up index.ts. So this is our Express server. If you're familiar with Express, this should be pretty familiar. Basically here, this is where I'm actually using the Express server, and then beneath that, what I need to do is I need to actually initialize what's called a Descope client. Descope client is basically an object part baked into the Node SDK that will associate our backend server with the project ID and make sure that and be able to use all of the built-in functions related to our project ID to validate the session and so forth. So what we need to do is we need to import Descope client from the Descope Node SDK. Oh, I see, I already imported that up there. In case that wasn't already done for you, you can just put this in your application just like this. And then we actually need to initialize it here, and we'll use something called client auth equals Descope client. And then all we'll need to associate this with our specific project is our project ID. This project ID, if we go back to our console, you can actually get this right here. This is the one that I was using. If you're using this one, just use this one. Otherwise, use whatever one that you set up. And then this now allows us to use the built-in basically validate session function that will take in any JOT that you send in and will validate that that is a authenticated person who used Descope to authenticate in the front end. And so we need to actually make sure that every one of these routes is protected using and passes through that middleware to validate that that session is true. And so we need to actually construct the middleware for that. And so we'll do that right here. And because we're using TypeScript, I actually have to define the types of the request, response, and the next. So pretty straightforward there. And then this will be our actual middleware function. What I'm actually going to do is make a try catch now and utilize the built-in function that we will get from the getting started wizard. So right here, as you can see under node, we have this const auth info equals await Descope client dot validate session token. So what I can do is I can just paste that in there, and then we actually called this client auth, not Descope client, but it's calling client auth dot validate session, and it will pass in the session token. So we just need to make sure that we actually get this from the request. And so in the actual request, what I can do is I can use this, or in the in our server, I can use this method that I've already created called get token, which is part of the auth helpers.ts file. This will basically take the token after the word bearer from the request authorization header and provide the session token. So all I need to do is pass in the request, pass it into the function get token, and it will basically just return what the session token is. And then from there, I can just validate the session. One thing to note, get token looks like it's not imported, so let's just do that real quickly. Get token auth helpers.ts. Oh, and should be also in there because of the function. Great. Cool. And then finally with cat, we can do something like, res status 401 send authorized and return. So basically, if client auth is unable to validate the session, then all we have to do is return a 401 and send unauthorized. And then finally, if that does work and everything's good, we'll just call next. And so again, if you're familiar with Express, what's going to happen is the middleware is going to, and then also I need to make sure that the router uses the auth middleware. So what's going to happen is the router's going to be set up. Every time you hit one of these routes with your API GET request, it's going to go through this middleware, validate that the session token is valid using the client auth Descope client. And then if it is not valid, it's going to return unauthorized. And if it is valid, it's going to continue on to the next function, which is defined here. And this will actually send all of this data. This data, by the way, I didn't go over, is just basic data in a generic TypeScript file that's it's not connected to any database or anything, and you can play around with that if you want. But yeah, so now because it's not React, I actually have to let's actually restart the server just to make sure that my changes are applied. And now, if I go to localhost 3000 and I try to make a request, here, and then of course I'm already signed in, so it's going to work. But let's log out real quick. So in the front end, I've logged out. Session token and everything is no longer in the browser. If I try and click something, it'll say unauthorized. And then actually, let me show you guys what that looks like in the actual API request. So if I go to network, you see here it returns a 401 unauthorized instead. But as soon as I log in, now it returns a 200 and actually gives me the data. So just to recap everything that I've done, I took a application that had zero reference to Descope, and I implemented a working sign-in page with basically any authentication method that you would possibly be interested in, anything from email OTP, magic link, enchanted link, OAuth, social login, biometric, anything like that, and allow a user to not only sign in, but also to validate on the server whether or not that person is a authenticated user, and be able to return the necessary information accordingly. We also changed the logout login button functionality so that it's dynamic depending on if the user logged in or not. So as you can see in half an hour, 40 minutes, we were able to fully implement that. Since we have a little bit of time left over, I'd like to kind of go over a few other kind of features that Descope might offer. First is what authentication methods are supported. And so if we go to our welcome screen right here, this is what we currently, have. This is what we currently have on our website. If I wanted to, let's say, add something like passkeys, and I wanted to add the ability to log in with passkeys, I can do it as simply as just dragging and dropping a few little things like that. And then now, under getting started, you can see, oh, sorry, my bad. I have to actually see right here. Yeah, perfect. Under my sign-in page now, you see there's an ability to sign in with passkeys. What I can do is I can type in some random email address and set up passkeys with that email address. And so you can't see it, but basically what I'm doing is I'm using my biometric information instead of a username and password or OAuth or something like that to successfully log in. And you can see authentication completed. This is the actual job. This is the token that is sent from the client to the server in each request. Right here. This token right here is undecoded would look something like this. And what I can do is in my application, if I try and log in again, now I can actually use, let's see, I can set up Kevin+41@descope.com and then use passkey, create a passkey here, and log in strictly with my biometric information. And the next time that I log in, let's actually change this so that it autofills. You can go back to flows, go to enable sign-in with passkey autofill. When I actually sign in again, you can see here, there's a list of passkeys that I can use, and I can log in with my biometrics like this without any password or anything like that. So that's something that you can do with flows and add very easily and seamlessly. There's plethora of other things you can play around with, but that's kind of the concept and advantage of using something like flows. Also, I will mention for OAuth social login, all of these methods, you can use our own application. You can use our own social login app, or if you want to customize your own and have your own branding and everything like that, you can do that all through the authentication methods right here. Finally, I will say if you want to style this, I know it wasn't the most beautiful flow screen. You can style using all of these, all of these options. If I want to make something like a shadow and I want to make it a little bit more rounded and maybe change the color of it, I can do that here. And also with styles, I can change the background color to be something maybe a little bit different. Here, change the entire background of the container. So maybe I can change it to something like that's black, and then apply change to all screens. So now in my welcome screen, you can see it shows a black background instead. And like I said, everything is automatically updated in your application, like so. All right. So if anyone has any questions, let's see. If I don't use Descope as my IDP, can I still use authentication flow? Absolutely. So we actually offer the ability to use via the OIDC standard, use Descope as a federated IDP, and which allows you to utilize the authentication process that you've seen here, but still use Cognito or Ping or whatever other IDP that you're using for user information, and not have to manage it in the Descope console. And there's actually a few blogs on our website about how to use OIDC with Firebase, Cognito, and Auth0, as well as generic OIDC related documentation on our docs page. Any other questions? How can I add custom information to the job? Okay, very straightforward and simple. So let's alter this real quick. So under OAuth, all we need to do is use a custom claim action block to add it to the job. I can show you that right here. And then this information, we can call it, let's call it name, and we can say, let's put in the user's name. What we can do is if we're using OAuth, after the user successfully logged in, we can include in the JOT a custom claim with a key of name and set to whatever the user's name is. And then before the JOT is created at end, it will add that to the JOT. And so if I log in with Google, you can see here, now, besides the generic DRN, EXP, and issuer and that stuff like that, it actually also displays the name in the JOT. And so this can be utilized for a variety of things, but a very good example would be if you have something in your front end that needs information, and that can access very easily without connecting to a database or something like that. Anything else? Any other questions? No. All right. Oh, we got one question. Can you explain again the difference between sign up or in to sign in and sign up and flow? Okay. So yeah. So basically, the React code here, this is the actual login component, Descope component, has a flow ID set to sign up or in. So this refers to which flow that you've created. So the one that I actually wanted in my application, you saw, we go back to our sign-in page, I wanted to display this sign up or in flow. And so that one is using this particular flow. However, if you wanted to, let's say you wanted to have a specific flow for sign up, specific flow for sign in, specific flow for promoting biometrics, for example, that can all be done very easily. You just need to, in your Descope component, put it wherever you want in your application and just change the flow ID here. Yeah. All right. Anything else? All right. Well, thank you everyone for attending the presentation. Look forward to seeing you all, seeing some of you maybe again next month when we do that one. Thank you and have a nice day.